Hey guys, Sanjay Nagraj here, co-founder and CTO Traceable. Welcome you all. Over the past 18 months, we have been working hard to solving application security problems for the next generation. And we would love to share with you what has been cooking on our end since we started this amazing journey. There'll be a couple of polls along the way, but let's very quickly jump in and start talking about it. So we'll take you through the thinking around modern application security today and how it is shifting. We'll do a short demo of the product. And we'll talk to Greg about why they looked at Traceable. And also we'll spend some time answering your questions. Guys, again, it's a very packed webinar. Let's just get started. We have an amazing panel here. Greg from Houwzer is here. Inan is our head of security research. Ravi is our data geek. Martin and Andreas are amazing advisors that way as part of the team. Having worked in DevOps since kind of the movement began in a way, if you look at it, Jyoti and I saw the gradual shift happening towards distributed microservices and APIs. And the APIs and the protocols also evolved from proprietary to standardized protocols like like REST, of course, GraphQL, gRPC, and everything else, with the flexible data structures as well changing in terms of JSON and YAML that allowed for frequent evolution of these APIs as well. So we knew as we were looking at some of these changes that it is time to rethink application security. And an amazingly talented team of people across US and India came together to be part of this journey. And so let's talk through that a little bit and then start to discuss like some of the interesting problems that we have seen that we set out to solve basically, right? And some of the problems that we saw was starting to stem from the major shift in application architectures that started to happen in terms of architectures and the way the development started to progress. And if you look at it, there were a lot of new applications that were getting built, and the legacy applications actually were being migrated to more cloud native architectures. And however, if you look at the application security approaches and the solutions, we're still catching up to protect some of these applications from the ever evolving threat landscape that way. And according to a 2019 O'Reilly survey, which many of you guys would have looked at, is 70% of the respondents have actually adopted cloud native technologies that way. But 40% of them reported actually that security is still their top concern for this new set of architectural developments that way. So one of the things that we need to do is enable this safe and secure transition to cloud native architectures, including the move to distributed architectures, which heavily uses Kubernetes and many such cloud native tooling. And aligning security development and DevOps that way as teams to ensure secure coding and testing practices. And to work together as a team where Dev and Sec and Ops kind of come together to help you monitor, protect, and investigate your production applications. That's the need of the hour. Because if you look at one of the biggest security challenges in cloud native applications is related to the broad use of microservices, which is where all of the migration has happened over the years. And compare that to the legacy monolithic applications, microservices increase the pace of development, meaning leaving security to catch up with insufficient and inaccurate information. And there's proliferation of APIs that happen along the way, right? And if you look at it, the legacy security tools need to be actually much more modern to protect you against these modern and emerging threats, and to make the root cause analysis to be much more efficient. And the goal, I guess, for anything as in a modern application security solution is to help you enable to migrate to these next generation of services. So these challenges are very real and even impact some of the largest and most technically proficient companies in the world. And we've all seen these over a period of time. Now let's take a few minutes and get an industry perspective from Martin and Andreas. Hey, Martin.
Yes.
I want to ask you, as a security professional and as part of Outreach, which is a cloud-first SaaS company that way, you live and breathe DevOps and Agile. What do we need to do to keep it up? Is DevSecOps real?
Yes, DevSecOps is definitely real. Although, in my opinion, maybe an unnecessary term. You know, DevOps already considers security in its methodology, and I think security professionals are just feeling a little left out, as we often do. But I think platforms like traceability help bridge that gap. You know, as a solution provider, anytime you can solve the pain for both security and engineering, you help sidestep that awkward resource and prioritization discussion that security and engineering teams often have to have. You get straight to the problem solving with both parties ready and eager to work together. You know, it's tough to keep up. Engineering teams are always going to have bigger budgets, and they're always going to be larger than the security team. And, you know, so partnering is essential. You know, teaching people how to fish is the only way my team can keep up. I have to rely on our product and engineering teams to be able to run a threat model, for example, without security in the room. So, you know, we talk about shifting left as if it's a new thing, but I really just think it's a new way of saying planning, which has always been critical and is still critical in DevOps, even if the speed and processes don't seem to jive with that. You know, if you're going to rely on people in that way and security isn't their primary job role, you have to catch their interest. You need to appeal to their pain and offer a solution for it. I think starting with API performance and traceability is the perfect intersection to pique that interest. You know, engineering, security's role is to predict, evaluate, and manage risk, and then provide guidance and advice to those teams in a way that resonates with partners like engineering. I think Andreas is going to talk a little bit more, and I'll let him address how he and his team help manage risk in their particularly, I think, relevant industry where security and risk is always top of mind.
Yeah. Andreas.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thanks everyone, and thanks Sanjay for having me. It's true, right? We have a unique opportunity currently at hand. You know, whenever we talked about security in the past, it's something which came with technology changes whatsoever. This time we have a fundamental change in the way we do business, right? And with every kind of these major changes, there are new threats and new risks. Even companies like Gartner predict now that 90% of the web applications are the APIs, the biggest attack vector, right? And they say most probably in 2022, all major data breaches, which we will see, are caused by API security flaws. And so that means it's not only a bottom-up technology deal, it's also a top-down board level, risk management level kind of objective to tackle and to talk about. I'm relatively certain that most of the risk boards will have API security and the new threats coming for the new way of doing business on their agenda pretty soon. And you know, you talked about Uber, it's here on the thing. I found the US Postal Service hack in 2018 where we lost 60 million records was also based already on a missing API access control on objects, right? So it is real already. It's nothing theoretical. So even if you do risk management backwards looking based on experience, we will see already there, hey guys, this is real. And this is a topic which we can address from top down the same thing, the same way we address it from bottom up from the technology stack. I like especially, you know, believe in standards or not whatsoever, but I'm a big fan of the Open Web Application Security Project, right? And when they decided to move away from the pure apps top 10 to a special top 10 on API vulnerabilities, that's a signal, right? Things we need to watch out for. And again, you know, not that the topics which are in there are completely new. They're just different, right? It's still the open window in the apartment, which is not a risk, right? Which is just a vulnerability. But the threats to this open window are changing, and the impact of that open window with together with that are changing. We still talk about authentication, authorization. Ta-da, not really something new, right? Misconfigurations, specifically security misconfiguration, also not brand new. Data security and data exchange, very big topic. Logging and monitoring, for me, the biggest topic and that's all these topics we will and can address with Traceable in one way or the other, right? It is the idea really to bring the teams together, and it's supporting the teams in DevOps, as Martin just said. It's the security team which gets something, but also the programmers, the coders at the beginning, where they get some help. It's not about finger pointing, it's about helping end to end and have an approach to it. And if we continue and be successful with creating this transparency and discover anomalies and changes as they happen, we will have a much lower risk posture, and at the firm, every firm, whoever will be happy. If it's the third-party provider coding for someone, if it's my internal team which provides services for us, it's a win-win situation. And therefore, I can only tell everyone, have a look at it and take this serious, because it's a, you know, you hit 3 flies with 1 hit at least by using such a platform. So therefore, it is a topic for us as well.
I agree. Again, thanks, Martin and Andreas. So now the question is, how do we think about this differently? And the idea there is that we believe that modern application security solutions need that full application context. That context that you need should understand how the user actions are connected to the edge APIs, which are then connected to the internal services, and the APIs and the data as it flows through in and out of these data services into third-party services. You need to understand that end-to-end context. And one of the key things that helps us build this application context is the power of distributed tracing. It helps us to understand everything from user actions across various devices, including user roles and permissions. It helps you understand the API activity, both at the edge and internal to your application, and how the data is flowing throughout the application across microservices, external services, and back into the clients that way, and how the code is executed at that individual APIs. You need that complete context in order for you to kind of go and understand the flow from user to APIs to the data to the code, right? And that is what we built Traceable, in keeping that in mind, to help you solve that next generation of problems by combining the power of distributed tracing to observe all of the interactions and the transactions that happens, and Trace AI, which uses this data to learn normal and application behavior. This combination in Traceable helps you solve, the customer, that way, to monitor, protect, and investigate your cloud native services and APIs. Now, let me bring in Ravi to discuss briefly about Trace AI and the thought process behind it. Ravi, with this technology, we deliver actionable security that monitors the activity in the context, identifies the threats and protects from them, and helps connect security and DevSecOps to investigate and remediate vulnerabilities. Ravi, a little bit, why don't you walk us through a bit around Trace AI itself?
Yeah, sure, Sanjay. Yeah, so I just have 5 minutes to go over a lot of machine learning work which we have done over the last 1 year. So what I will do is I'll just pick one important feature in Trace AI, and I will kind of explain our philosophy and what exactly that specific feature does. So if you look at and analyze machine learning based solutions across the board, you will observe one pattern, that is these solutions succeed only when there are 2 factors which support them. One is the quality and richness of data, and the other is the choice of the algorithms itself. Talking about data, what we believe is Traceable's platform provides you a comprehensive data story out of the box, thereby freeing up all data scientists from having to perform a lot of data association implementations. We spend a lot of time data munging, we spend a lot of time putting different pieces of data together in order to build that comprehensive story, but the Traceable platform gives that out of the box. So which means 50% of the problem is solved right at the data stage. Now this takes us to the next aspect, which is that of the algorithms itself. So it's important to accept the fact that in most application security, or even in security applications, general security applications, especially related to business logic or API security, these applications lend themselves poorly to supervised learning. So keeping this in mind, Trace AI implements a novel behavioral anomaly engine. What it first does is it comprehensively observes 4 entities, namely users, APIs, data flow, and code. Then it automatically builds a baseline for behaviors corresponding to these four entities. So in the slide here, you can see we are talking about 4 behaviors, which is user behavior, the data flows behavior, API activity, and code execution. Now, once these behaviors the baselines for these behaviors are built, what Trace AI does is it observes the data coming in and matches them against these baselines and tries to figure out anomalies. The beauty of Trace AI is once it figures out these anomalies, it also attributes these anomalies to various factors. So you can quantify these anomalies on different dimensions so that the analyst can understand what are the factors that influence a particular anomaly which was detected by the platform. As a byproduct of this primary goal, we can also discover various things such as attackers' modus operandi, identifying evolving threats to business logic, and most importantly, attribute these observations to specific groups of users or even to individual users. Further, we have put in a lot of effort to make Trace AI work at scale. We have engineered ML solutions by building the core algorithms ground up instead of relying on entirely on machine learning libraries. In this slide, if you see, we are basically showing you visually what behavior looks like. So if you look at it, behavior looks like a very complex graph. And in this particular graph, the dark color nodes which you're seeing are APIs, and all the links which you're seeing are flows of data going through between these APIs. Now, for an analyst, it's very difficult to analyze this graph because the actual behaviors are hidden inside it. So what Trace AI does is it processes these graphs and extracts out cohorts of user behaviors and shows these user behavior cohorts to analysts so that they can perform actions directly on these groups of users. So in the pictures which we're showing here, we can see there are like 4 different behaviors which are shown. There's an outlier or odd behavior, there's an attack sequence, there's a benign behavior. There could be even outliers, there could be some iteration patterns which are common with bots, and so on. So from a use case point of view, an analyst can analyze these cohorts of users. They can put the entire cohort into a watch list. They can block users in a cohort, escalate the risk profile of users within this cohort, and therefore trigger stricter controls for these particular users based on their behavior patterns. Now, we all know that graph algorithms are combinatorially very expensive. So what we have done is we have taken a unique approach to address this issue. The underlying algorithms convert these graphs into a form suitable for vector processing, thereby allowing us to use some recent advances in machine learning, and this also helps us handle the issues of scale. So this is a very brief overview to Trace AI. We have a lot more to talk about it. Probably we can do it in another forum. But at this stage, I just leave you with this brief introduction to Trace AI.
Thanks, Ravi. And again, as Ravi said, there's a lot more to talk about this, and we look forward to having some one-on-one conversations with many of you guys to kind of drill into a lot of these things. Now, let's look at a brief demo of the product. The difficulty is to take all of the work that's been done over the past 18 months and kind of put that in a box as in a demo, but I'll try my best to just go through a few things as part of the product. So one of the key things that as you get into the product itself that you will notice is something of an aggregated view of everything that's happening within your system. where we are able to capture the threats as in users who are actually malicious users who are triggering these threats. And we are able to kind of walk you through and help you understand how the attacks are shaping up compared to how it was in the past time ranges that you're actually looking at. And there are many things that we look at from assets perspective, as in understanding your edge APIs, understanding your internal services and everything else. And we are able to clearly highlight who the attackers were and what percentage of APIs and services are under attack. And like everything else, the security events form basis of what the attacks are. But in our world, we don't stop there. We actually go and aggregate that, as Ravi was saying, by using the Trace AI as a technology to help you actually categorize and understand the kill chain for a particular actor as to how they went through this attack process itself. And so I'll drill into a little bit of that, where we kind of, I'm going to show you some of that, but here the main dashboard itself is to bring you into the key things that you should be focusing on. Then if you drill down further, one of the key things that we do as part of the flow itself is to have our distributed tracing build out your entire map of your services and your data itself as it's flowing through these APIs and services. And we have this entire understanding of those services and APIs. Now, if you drill into these services that we have kind of aggregated into, you basically will be able to you will be able to kind of see that there is a bunch of endpoints that we actually capture as part of these. And also there is a bunch of metrics in terms of your key metrics that helps with your DevSecOps as a movement to enable your developers and DevOps, as Martin was talking about, to get that idea of how your service is actually performing with respect to all of the other endpoints as well. And as you look through the various endpoints within the system itself, you'll be able to understand that where these endpoints fit into your overall architecture itself. And these endpoints are API endpoints are either as an edge APIs or an internal APIs. And also there is a concept of a backend which lets you tie in all the way into the third-party services and your data services. Now, if I drill into one of these APIs itself, you're able to actually see again the metrics at that level, and in terms of also the data flow at that level as well. But one of the key things that I wanted to a little bit spend time on and show you is what Trace AI is built on is a way that we automatically identify your API's definition itself, as in what we are calling it as a knowledge graph, where we understand what your APIs are. Similarly, we understand what your user interactions are, and a specification is formed for that. And then you understand the data that's flowing through the services. So this is just to give you a preview of how the definitions itself are formed for these APIs dynamically at runtime based on the data itself. And this is where a lot of the learning comes into play in terms of how we do it. And this happens across all of the 4 layers. What you're looking at it is at an API level. Then there is data at the interaction, which is session level. And then there is the user level itself of this usage. And then there is the data as it is flowing through these APIs as in interactions of the APIs. All of these things forms the basis of Trace AI, which comes with the distributed tracing as a platform underneath that. Right? So if you look at the data here, some of the pieces are very clear in terms of identifying the PII data as part of all of these things as well. So we know which part of the data is sensitive and which APIs are carrying some of the sensitive data. Now, if you drill further into based on these specifications itself, we are actually forming threats for a particular set of services and APIs and everything else. In this case, we have triggered an attack where Hugo is coming in. He's the malicious actor that way. And malicious actor has gone through and triggered a bunch of different types of attacks, as in even regular injection attacks. But there is a way of a kill chain that gets formed as part of all of these things. So we understand the attacks. We are monitoring all the way from low to high that way, that we have a concept which we can talk about. And this helps us actually map this in the background as well to understand the attack vectors and where they are coming from. And of course, there is all of the details on this in terms of, as you go into the event, you're able to figure out all the different ideas around it. but this is, I just wanted to give you an idea of at least how we map the all the security events. That way, if you look at it and formulate threats out of that event itself, this is what forms the functionality of monitoring it end to end as in services that we have, and then enabling you to protect against the threats based on modern threats as well as the legacy threats that we have been looking at, as in OWASP top API that way, and OWASP legacy that way, right? And what I'll leave you with is one short other thing about slice and dice on these, which we significantly do again, and there is capabilities available in the product to kind of go and help you drill down further into all of this data, which will give you ideas about what type of SQL statements happened as part of the attack vector itself, and what are the services that triggered, and what was the full chain of code itself that got executed as part of this. So as I said, very hard to actually put it in concise way that the entire work that's been done, but would love to sit down with many of you guys one-on-one to go through a further detailed demo of the product. Now let me bring in Greg to talk about Houwzer. Greg, and why did you choose Traceable? And I think we should talk about Houwzer a little bit and then talk about Traceable itself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Greg Phillips. I'm the CTO of Houwzer. We are a modern discount real estate brokerage, which basically means that we're bringing a technology forward approach to real estate transactions, which has been, I think, long overdue for technology, not just disruption, but also improvement of the process. So when we think about our technology, we want to maintain the things that are important in a real estate transaction, important to have humans involved. So we have human being real estate agents, transaction coordinators interacting with our clients to help them buy and sell their homes. We also provide mortgages and we provide title, all in an integrated experience. So when you interact with Houwzer, a big part of our service delivery is our technology platform. So even though we retain the humans, our human being real estate agents are a lot more productive than your typical local real estate agent who's doing everything manually. So we have a technology platform that is backed by APIs that implement all the automations and business logic of doing a real estate transaction. And it's actually a pretty complicated API because our transactions are localized for 5 states that all have slightly different laws and regulations, adding a 6th currently. So really a pretty expansive API, and it's too much in the API to mentally hold in your head at this point, or even look at a glance in terms of, even if you had a list of all the endpoints. So a tool like Traceable made a ton of sense for us, particularly because not only are APIs getting pretty large, but we're also facilitating pretty high value transactions. So this year we'll do hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate and mortgage transactions. Next year we'll probably do over $1 billion. And one of the attack vectors, the one that causes me to lose sleep at night, is if someone can get access to privileged information about a transaction that's ongoing and pose as, let's say, someone who works for a title company and say, oh, the wiring instructions have changed. Here are the new wiring instructions. Instead of wiring to this, wire to these wiring instructions for your closing. I mean, that's a common attack in our industry, and millions of dollars at least are lost annually to that attack. And so security is paramount for us, particularly because we have APIs that our end users are interacting with to conduct their transaction.
Yeah. So tell me, like, how does monitoring help you improve development and operations that way as you deal with that?
Yeah. So this is actually the thing. The security is huge too, but this is actually, like, I think a killer feature for us is that I wanted to look at, we think about, on the development team, we think about designing our APIs from, our imagined perspective of what the usage patterns are going to be. We never before had visibility into the actual usage patterns of our API. So which data is being accessed, how frequently, what are the hotspots, which types of users are accessing which types of data. We can drill into those questions. So even in a non-security context, when we just want to think about where should we focus our resources, which APIs should we prioritize improving performance or improving quality, or training, it really points us to focusing on the right areas, and then we can discover APIs that are maybe not really being used very often and fold those into other APIs or deprecate them and simplify our architecture as well.
Makes sense. And that also helps you from a security perspective, I guess. That's one of the key things.
So I mean, I think Martin mentioned it earlier, but security and product and DevOps are like kind of like a tight, there's a big middle of that Venn diagram. So you have to kind of think about all three at the same time. There are security specialists, product specialists, infrastructure specialists, that work in all those areas, but you have to look at the overlap if you really want to succeed in all three. They all depend on each other.
Correct. And I think the one of the things that you were also interested in looking at it is how we are tying it to the users and the roles itself, and that was very important to you.
Yeah, definitely. So we, because our transactions are such high value, we have to even, suspect our internal users. Unfortunately, we have already, as a young company, had, theft that has occurred internally in terms of checks that have gone missing and things like that. So because we have such sensitive data pertaining to real estate transactions, we really need to have the log of who has accessed what data at the individual level and understand who's looking at what from a security perspective. And the other side of that is also to look at the user role. So as our company grows and it starts to become difficult to look at individual users, we might need to look at first at the group level. So does this class of user, are they accessing all the data that we think they're accessing, or are they actually able to access more than we thought they could? And in a complicated API, it's not so easy to know that ahead of time just by reading the back-end code. You really have to look at the production data to be sure.
Correct. Again, the one of the things about the users and the roles, and Ravi was talking about it in terms of how we are able to build the user behavior that way. I think that's something that you've been talking about now, which is really great, because some of that is coming to fruition with many of the customers that are using it now.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that develops. I think that the data set that you're building is going to be really, really cool. I mean, one of the things that we do at Houwzer, that we get to see every single real estate transaction, so we know what can go wrong, what the best practices are, and we have a huge team, so we can take those things, build them into our platform, and make sure that everyone gets the wisdom from all of our customers and all the transactions. You can do the same thing. With your data set, you can see all the things that go wrong in terms of API vulnerabilities at a very granular level and build them into your machine learning. So I think that that's going to be a very cool data set, and it will increase in value the more users you have accessing and contributing to that data set.
Awesome. Perfect. Hey, thanks, Greg, again for taking the time, and obviously, as all of the early customers that way, I think that's what keeps us going and keeps us building great things is the feedback from you guys and getting to that next level as we go and build more and more functionality into the product. Thanks, Greg, again.
You're welcome.